The rain had been pouring all evening, slapping against the high glass walls of Chikobi's mansion. The city lights of Lagos shimmered through the storm, and his phone wouldn't stop buzzing with calls, messages, and reminders about the empire he managed. At just 32, Chike was already one of Nigeria's youngest billionaires, a man who wore power like a tailored suit. But beneath the sharp exterior, his home was silent, echoing with the emptiness money could never fill. It was past 11 p.m. when he finally pulled into the driveway. His driver rushed to shield him with an umbrella, but Chike waved him off and jogged toward the marble steps, his mind still replaying numbers and strategies from the day. He wanted nothing more than a hot shower and a few hours of sleep before the next morning's meeting. Inside, the mansion smelled faintly of lavender polish and roasted plantain, evidence of his staff finishing dinner cleanup earlier. Most of the workers had retired to their quarters, save for Amara. Amara. She was only 22, the newest maid in the house, quiet and reserved. She rarely looked him in the eye, though Chike had noticed her once or twice, slender, soft-featured, with a quiet dignity that seemed too big for her uniform. She wasn't flashy like the women he was used to. There was a purity about her, almost fragile, that made her easy to overlook. Until that night. Chike climbed the stairs, phone in hand, scrolling through a message from his CFO. Distracted, he barely noticed the storm flickering the power. He turned down the hallway toward his private bathroom, but in his absent-mindedness, he opened the wrong door. Steam billowed out like mist. The scent of soap and warm skin filled the air. He froze. Amara stood inside, droplets of water clinging to her body. A towel hung loosely around her, doing little to hide the curve of her hips, the delicate slope of her collarbone. Her eyes widened when she saw him, her employer, the billionaire she dared not even speak casually to, standing in the doorway of her bathroom. The world seemed to pause. The rain outside muted. His phone slid from his hand and thudded softly on the rug. His voice caught in his throat. He hadn't meant to. He hadn't planned this. Yet he couldn't move. Amara clutched the towel tighter against her chest, but she didn't scream. Her lips parted slightly, breath quickened, her gaze locked on his. Seconds stretched. Her skin glowed in the steam, droplets running down in trails that his eyes betrayed him by following. He told himself to step back, to apologize, but something deeper pinned him there, a hunger he hadn't felt in years. Finally, with trembling hands, Amara whispered, "Sir, this is my bathroom." The sound of her voice broke the trance. Chike blinked, shook himself awake, and stumbled back a step. "God, Amara, I'm so sorry. Wrong door. I didn't mean." His words tumbled out like a guilty schoolboy's. He turned, slammed the door shut, and leaned against the wall, pressing his palm to his chest. His heart was pounding, harder than it had in any boardroom. He picked up his phone and hurried into his own room, but the image of her, skin glistening, eyes wide, towel slipping, was etched into his mind. That night, he lay in his massive bed, staring at the ceiling. The storm rattled the windows, but it wasn't the thunder that kept him awake. It was her. Amara. She lay awake too. Her room was small compared to the mansion's grandeur, but it felt suffocating as she replayed the scene over and over. She had never been looked at like that before, not by a man like him. Chikobi, the billionaire who could have any woman in Lagos, had seen her most vulnerable, her most exposed. She should have felt violated, angry. Instead, her heart had raced not with fear but with something far more dangerous. Desire. The next morning, the mansion returned to its rhythm. Workers moved about quietly, preparing breakfast, polishing floors, setting up the day. Amara avoided his gaze, focusing on her tasks, yet she felt his presence wherever he walked. And Chike noticed everything. The way her hair fell across her cheek as she bent over to arrange flowers. The way her lips pursed as she concentrated on scrubbing a vase. The curve of her waist beneath the plain uniform. He had lived in luxury, dined with royalty, been surrounded by models and socialites, but none of them stirred him like the sight of Amara carrying a basket of fresh laundry through the hall. At lunch, when she served him, his hand brushed hers as she set down his plate. A jolt ran through them both. He looked up sharply, catching the flicker of heat in her eyes before she quickly lowered them. Later, in his study, he found himself staring out the window, watching her cross the garden with a watering can. The sunlight kissed her skin, and he had to close his fists to stop himself from going to her. That evening, as he passed her in the corridor, their shoulders grazed. Neither spoke, but the silence between them was heavy, charged with the memory of steam and water and naked skin. When he reached his room, Chaik sank into a chair, raking his fingers through his hair. This was madness. He had never allowed his personal and professional lives to blur, never let desire interfere with control. But Amara was undoing him without even trying. In her small room, Amara touched her lips, remembering the way his gaze had burned into her the night before. She told herself it was wrong, that she must stay away. Yet deep down, she knew something had already shifted. Something neither of them could undo. The mistaken door had opened more than a bathroom. It had opened the beginning of temptation. The mansion was quiet again that night, but Chaik couldn't shake the weight pressing against his chest. It had been 3 days since the accident with the bathroom door, yet the memory haunted him like a fever. No matter how many contracts he signed, meetings he held, or calls he took, his mind always slipped back to her, Amara, standing in the mist, her body wrapped in a towel that seemed to cling more to his thoughts than to her. He tried drowning it out with work, with whiskey, with late-night drives into the city, but nothing worked. Desire had planted itself in him, deep and stubborn, and it was growing. Amara, on her part, kept her distance. She worked even quieter than usual, keeping her head down, her steps soft, as though she believed invisibility would protect her. But every time she heard his voice call out for his driver, or his footsteps echo in the hall, her stomach tightened. She hated how much she longed to see him, hated how her skin tingled with memory. On the 4th night, temptation struck. The storm had passed, leaving the sky swollen with stars. Amara had crept into the back garden, barefoot, her skirt brushing the grass as she carried a small lantern. She often came here at night, when the world was still, to water the little row of flowers she had secretly planted by the fence. They reminded her of home, wild lilies her mother used to gather by the riverbank. She thought she was alone, but she wasn't. Chaik had been in his study, restless, staring out the wide glass windows when he saw the glow of her lantern in the garden. Something about the sight pulled him, her small figure moving gently among the flowers, as though she carried a lightness none of his wealth could buy. Without thinking, he left his study and followed. Amara knelt, brushing her fingers across a leaf, when she felt a presence. She turned, startled, nearly dropping the lantern. "Sir?" she gasped softly. Chaik stood just a few feet away, hands in his pockets, the moonlight cutting across his sharp features. He looked almost out of place here, this man of suits and skyscrapers, in the simple garden. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, his voice low, warm. "I saw the light. I wondered who was out here." She swallowed, standing slowly. I sometimes water the flowers at night. It helps me think." His gaze lingered on her, the way the moon kissed her skin, the way her hair fell loose over her shoulder. She looked nothing like the women at his business galas, no diamonds or silk, yet she was more captivating than any of them. "They're beautiful," he said, glancing at the flowers. "They remind me of home," she murmured, her eyes flicking up to his before darting away. He stepped closer, the scent of his cologne mixing with the garden's earthiness. Her heart raced. "You remind me of something I can't seem to name," he said quietly, almost to himself. Amara's breath caught. She should have turned away, should have walked back into the house, but her feet refused to move. The space between them shrank, charged, until his hand brushed against hers. Just a graze. Just a whisper of contact. But it burned. For a long moment they stood like that, breathing the same air, their hands almost touching. She felt herself swaying toward him, felt his gaze drop to her lips. Then she pulled back, trembling. "I should go," she whispered, clutching the lantern. He let her slip away, but his chest ached with the emptiness she left behind. The days that followed were worse. Temptation became a constant shadow, hovering between them in the hallways, in the dining room, in the library where Amara polished the shelves while Chaik pretended to read. Their eyes found each other when they shouldn't. Their hands brushed when they passed objects. Each stolen glance felt like a secret kiss. Then came the library storm. It was a Sunday afternoon, the sky heavy with clouds. Amara had been dusting the shelves, her ladder propped against rows of books. Chaik had retreated there, searching for silence. When the storm broke, lightning split the sky and the power cut. The mansion fell into darkness, save for the dim glow of a few emergency candles. Amara climbed down from the ladder, clutching her chest. "Sir?" "I'm here," his voice came from the far end of the room. She lit a candle, her hands shaking, the flickering light painting golden shadows across the walls. Chaik stepped closer, the glow catching his jawline, his eyes. The storm rumbled outside, but in here, the silence was louder. He moved toward her, slow, deliberate, his gaze fixed on her as though nothing else existed. The candle trembled in her grip. "Amara," he whispered, her name rolling off his tongue like a secret he'd been waiting to say. Her knees weakened. He reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch lingered against her cheek, warm, steady. She closed her eyes. The distance between them dissolved, his breath brushing her skin. Her lips parted, waiting, trembling. Then, at the very last second, she turned her face, pulling away. "I can't," she whispered, clutching the candle tighter. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her pulse racing. Chaik stepped back, his jaw tight, his hands curling into fists. He wanted to fight it, wanted to demand why not, but he knew. She was his maid. He was her employer. This was forbidden. "Forgive me," he said finally, his voice rough, strained. He turned and left the room, leaving her in the candlelight, heart thundering. That night, neither of them slept. Amara sat by her small window, watching the rain trail down the glass. Her lips still tingled where his almost touched, her skin still hummed with the memory of his hand on her cheek. She hated herself for wanting him, hated herself for imagining what might have happened if she hadn't pulled away. Chaik paced his room like a caged lion. He poured whiskey, threw it back, poured again, but nothing burned hotter than the fire inside him. He told himself to stop, to lock his heart, to remember the rules. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing in the candlelight, trembling, waiting, almost his. The mansion felt like a trap now, every hallway charged with unspoken hunger. And temptation was winning. By the end of the week, everything between them had changed. Their interactions were shorter, tighter, but the air buzzed with heat. A simple glance across the dining room made her cheeks flush. A graze of his hand when she passed him a glass sent electricity running through him. They were fighting a war neither of them wanted to win. And deep down, they both knew, the storm hadn't broken yet. It was only building. The mansion glittered with light and music. Chaik rarely hosted parties, but tonight his home was alive with Lagos elite, politicians, investors, celebrities, and heirs to dynasties. Champagne glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and camera flashes illuminated designer gowns. To the outside world, it was just another billionaire's soiree. But for Chaik, the night was suffocating. Because every time he scanned the room, his gaze found Amara. She wasn't meant to stand out, just a maid in uniform, weaving quietly among the guests, balancing trays of wine. But to him, she was brighter than the chandeliers. Her hair was tied neatly back, her posture straight, her lips pressed in concentration as she moved between clusters of wealth and perfume. And yet, even in her plain dress, she carried something the others didn't. A quiet grace. A raw beauty. Chaik's chest tightened when he saw one of the younger men, a brash heir in an expensive suit, eyeing her too closely, leaning too near when she passed him a glass. Amara ducked away politely, but jealousy clawed at Chaik's throat. He clenched his jaw, forced himself to smile at his guests, but his patience thinned with every passing second. By the time the last car pulled away past midnight, he was a storm contained in a suit. Amara stayed behind to clean up, stacking empty glasses in the silent kitchen. The music was gone, the laughter faded, but her mind was restless. She felt his eyes on her all night, hot and heavy, and it had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. She was rinsing a tray when she sensed him. She didn't need to turn. She knew he was there. Amara, his voice came low, rough, still carrying the echo of restraint. Her hands froze. Water dripped from the tray. Slowly, she turned. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen, tie loosened, jacket discarded, shirt slightly open at the collar. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, dark, burning, dangerous. "We need to talk," he said. Her pulse quickened. She shook her head, whispering, "There's nothing to talk about, sir." "Yes, there is." He stepped closer, his presence filling the room. "You feel it." "I feel it. We've been pretending for weeks, but tonight," his voice cracked with hunger. "Tonight I couldn't stand watching them look at you. Like you were theirs." Her lips parted, words caught in her throat. He kept walking, each step deliberate, until he was in front of her. His hand reached out, brushing hers where she clutched the tray. The contact sent a shiver up her arm. "Tell me you don't want this," he whispered. "Tell me to stop, and I will." The silence was deafening. Her breath came fast, shallow. She should say no. She should pull away. But instead, her fingers slipped from the tray, letting it clatter into the sink. And then she was in his arms. His lips crashed onto hers, hot, urgent, years of loneliness and weeks of temptation igniting in a single spark. She gasped against him, then melted, her hands clutching his shirt. The kiss deepened, fierce, desperate, their bodies pressed close as though they had been starving for this moment. Chaik lifted her onto the counter, his hands gripping her waist, pulling her closer. She trembled beneath his touch, but her legs wrapped around him instinctively, holding him there, as though afraid he might slip away. Every wall they had built collapsed. Every rule they had clung to shattered. There was only heat, only hunger, only the forbidden fire they had been denying. When they finally broke apart, breathless, foreheads pressed together, she whispered, "We can't, this isn't right." Chaik cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. "Nothing has ever felt more right," he murmured. The hours that followed blurred into something neither of them could name. Time ceased to exist. The mansion, once cold and echoing, became alive with their whispered names, their laughter, their sighs. It was tender and wild all at once, the billionaire who had built walls of steel around himself now undone by a maid's touch, and the maid who had sworn never to dream beyond her station now lost in the arms of a man who had everything but love. When dawn crept through the windows, Amara lay against him, her head on his chest. For the first time in years, Chaik felt peace. He stroked her hair slowly, watching the sunlight paint her skin golden. But reality waited outside that bedroom door. Amara sat up, clutching the sheet. "What happens now?" she whispered. Chaik sat too, his hand catching hers. His eyes were steady, unwavering. "You don't go back to being just the maid. Not after this. Not after us." Her chest tightened. "People will talk. They'll call me names. They'll say I used you. That I'm—" "I don't care what they say," he interrupted firmly. "All I know is I've spent my life surrounded by people who wanted my money, my name, my power. And then you walked into my house with nothing but your honesty, your hands, your heart. You're the only real thing I've known." Tears pricked her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but fear gnawed at her. What if this was just desire, a fire that would burn out and leave her ashes? "Amara," he whispered, tilting her chin so she'd meet his eyes. "Stay. With me. Not as my maid, not as a secret, but as my woman. My partner." Her breath caught. She saw the sincerity in his gaze, the vulnerability of a man who had everything yet was offering her his heart. She should have hesitated. She should have asked for time. But instead, she leaned into him, her tears dampening his chest as she whispered, "Yes." The weeks that followed were not easy. Whispers spread among the staff, rumors floated in Lagos circles, and not everyone approved. But Chike didn't waver. He introduced her beside him at dinners, invited her to sit where she once served, and ignored the raised brows and sly smirks. Amara struggled with the attention, the sudden shift from invisibility to being the focus of eyes sharp as daggers. But every time doubt threatened her, Chike's hand found hers, steady and sure, grounding her. One evening, as they sat together on the mansion balcony, the city lights sprawling below them, Amara leaned into him. "You've turned my life upside down," she murmured. Chike kissed her temple, his voice soft. "No. You've turned mine right side up." And beneath the night sky, with the air thick with jasmine and promise, they sealed the fire they had once forbidden, now reborn as something stronger. Not scandal. Not secrecy. But love.